obviously Trump's base is with white working class voters, but now we're seeing it's just working class voters in general.
You know, identity politics is a dangerous drug. Most people, I believe they are many identities. They aren't just their race or just their gender or just their religion.
You're watching Restoring America, where we shine a light on the fundamental values of this country and all the reasons why they're worth saving. This week, we're going to talk about this roller coaster of an election cycle we've just been through, and where we as a country go from here. I'm Kaylee McGhee White, and this is Restoring America. There have been so many memorable moments from the 2024 cycle. We began with a heated primary on the Republican side and a non-existent one among Democrats. Then there was the jaw-dropping collapse of President Joe Biden after his debate against former President Donald Trump, which led to the unprecedented and successful effort to kick Biden off the ticket and replace him with Vice President Kamala Harris. Oh, and of course, let's not forget the 2 assassination attempts against Trump. But under all of this political chaos, there's a much bigger story, and that is the political realignment that began even before Trump came on the political scene in 2016 and is now being solidified in real time. This realignment has seen the Democratic Party go from being the party of the blue-collar worker to the party of the rich, white, and educated elite. Republicans, on the other hand, have made historic gains among minority voters in the working class. After everything we've seen this past year, one thing is clear. The political arena has been permanently changed, and I would argue that's for the better. We have a great panel today to help break all of this down, but before we get to them, make sure to like, subscribe for more, and head to washingtonexaminer.com. With me today is Tiana Lowe-Dutcher, a columnist for the Washington Examiner, and Jeremiah Poff, a commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. Thank you both so much for being here. This has been a crazy election cycle, and I want to start by talking about the political realignment that has really been driving our politics forward over the past several years. We know that this past cycle, the vast majority of Kamala Harris's support has come from college-educated voters in particular, while Trump has made pretty significant gains among minority groups, specifically with Hispanic voters. So is this the election that has solidified our political realignment, or could things continue to move and shift in future election cycles?
I think it will come up to the fact of if the genders realign with the races. So, for instance, you obviously saw these disproportionate gains among Latino men, black men not turning out for Harris like Democratic men have ever historically done since they became the backbone of the party. The question is, do Latino women follow suit? Do older Latino women follow suit? And do black women remain the backbone of the Democratic Party? The case when it could be is if you wind up seeing progressives continue their stranglehold of the party. If you have this explicitly inflationary policy that we all know disproportionately hurts working class folks who are, more likely than not, voters of color relative to non-working class folks. And Democrats decided to go all in on it. You know, identity politics is a dangerous drug because most people, I believe they are many identities. They aren't just their race or just their gender or just their religion. They can be many things all at once. And Democrats assumed that race and gender would be the only defining quality, and it wasn't.
I think one thing that's very interesting here is how we've seen the diploma gap continue to expand, and you know, obviously Trump's base is with white working class voters, but now we're seeing it's just working class voters in general. But I think the roots of this realignment predate Trump, and they're going to long last after him. And I think there's still probably room for the Republican Party to make further inroads in future elections among this demographic. At the same time, you know, it is a bit of a devil's bargain because they're trading in a whole bunch of high propensity voters for low propensity voters. But at the end of the day, it is a much bigger number of voters for them. So, you know, the question is, can they get them out, you know, going forward?
And Trump would argue that he could, but could Trump be replicated by someone else in the future? That's always the question. Now, there have been several unprecedented things that have happened this past election cycle. 2 assassination attempts, but the most significant was probably Biden being booted from the top of the Democratic ticket and Kamala replacing him without any sort of formal primary process. Do you think that in the future that coronation process is going to come back to bite the Democratic Party? Will there be any lasting consequences for the way that they handled that situation?
It's a bold move to run on democracy dies in darkness and Trump and January 6th and go ahead and blow up your entire primary after, it's easy to forget, the Democratic Party already sort of rigged the primary in Biden's favor to begin with. They went through vast measures to keep primary challengers off the ballot. So Marianne Williamson couldn't be on the ballot, RFK couldn't be on the ballot. And then when it was too late, when everyone realized what we all knew, what the media tried to deny for years and years, that Biden was just too old. I think there is a lesson here for both parties. You cannot choose the candidate. Top-down selections didn't work out. Hillary Clinton in 2016. It was a dangerous gambit to run in 2024 when you can imagine an Earth 2 where you had a Whitmer-Shapiro ticket for this election, and it's a clean sweep for Democrats, including with the Senate and the House.
Right.
It does feel like this year was like a decade's worth of history compressed into a few months. I definitely see that there's definitely going to be some soul searching about whether or not you can go back to the smoke-filled back rooms of before and form a winning coalition and movement in the future going forward. I think the Democrats are going to kind of view this as a one-off. I think they would be smart to, because part of what the primary process does is it allows you to kind of build a true grassroots movement. I mean, that's why Trump has been so successful, is because he started. I mean, he was at 2% when he started running in 2015, and now a group of challengers 8 years later still couldn't even make a real dent in his support. So, part of building that movement is what makes a successful presidential candidate. And I think if the Democrats try to replicate anything that they did this year, I think they're going to have a lot of problems going forward.
Well, and maybe this will, as Tiana mentioned, also cause them to rethink the way that they do handle their normal primary processes, which are still to a certain extent rigged in favor of, back in 2020, it was Biden as the centrist. Yeah. They sort of rigged it for him then. And then obviously this past year, they rigged it in his favor again because he was the incumbent. So it'll be interesting to see what they do moving forward. I want to talk about both of the campaigns and sort of the highlights, the downsides of their strategies. What, in your guys' opinion, were some of the best moments for Donald Trump and alternatively for Kamala Harris?
Trump has gotten a lot of flack this time around for saying, if Kamala ran the gals campaign, Trump ran the guys campaign because he did the pod bro circuit. I would actually venture he appealed more to suburban women, more to, let's say the Romney Clinton voters this time around than he has in any of his other 2 times running. He made sure to venture with, he didn't back the terrible class of midterm candidates from 2022. So he had safe people to ride his coattails. He was focused. It was a bread and butter election for him. It was a bread and butter campaign. It was not overly focused on fringe issues. It was not too online the way we saw in 2020, which really cost him the election on top of the unprecedented nature of COVID. The fact that he felt safe, credit to Crystal Savita and Susie Wiles. You did not see him with Nick Fuentes or Kanye West or any of, really the cavalcade of charlatans that sometimes have been able to infiltrate the Trump org. Instead, he was, doing fundraisers with Elon Musk, Ben Shapiro, people that do have like a certain level of crossover appeal outside of just the Trump bubble of folks who are going to crawl over broken glass to vote for him.
It may sound a little cliche, but I thought Trump's strongest moments on the campaign trail were his second Butler rally and then the Madison Square Garden rally. I think both of those kind of typified the fact that he was leading a movement and not just a political campaign, and in large part why it was such a resounding effort on his get out the vote effort for him. And I think to me that was that image of him walking back on the stage in Butler is going to be one of the enduring memories of the 2024 campaign.
And as I was saying, was an iconic line.
It was just like made for TV moment. But if I had to pinpoint one other thing that he did really, really well, I think that willingness to go anywhere and speak to anyone that has been, I think, a weakness of Republicans recently. Especially both him and J.D. Vance did an excellent job of, flooding the circuit with interviews of, ranging from Theo Vaughn to Jake Tapper. I think, to Tiana's point, like, all of those things spoke to everyone.
Yeah.
Whether or not you were willing to listen is another story, but it was, I think, a home run for the campaign.
And it demonstrated a desire to expand the electoral map and also the coalition. Having a rally in Madison Square Garden and other very blue strongholds does definitely signal that he's trying to expand the movement far past just the Republican base. Now, what about Kamala Harris? Did she have any really great moments on the campaign trail, and were there any significant mistakes that she will look back on and regret in the future?
I think she kind of peaked early, and that was to her detriment. But I think the DNC convention speech was probably her strongest moment, followed by the debate. The problem was that, at that point, you still had 2 months worth of the campaign left. And the debate was memorable. It galvanized her. It gave the image that her campaign was really working, and it could have it had a real shot to make up for where Biden had been trailing for so long. But again, it was in the second week of September, and we still had another 2 months to go until Election Day. And I think, what was her greatest strength also proved to be her greatest weakness.
I mean, the greatest part of her campaign is this is a woman who didn't survive to the Iowa caucuses in 2020, locked up the Democratic nomination in 72 hours. And that sounds like I'm backhandedly insulting her, because that was the feat. The feat was, this is someone that has never won a single primary vote, was coronated, which means she was playing nice with Biden from the moment he imploded on the debate stage. He would never have endorsed her if she was shivving him behind the scenes. She got the Pelosi endorsement, she got the Clintons. It was only the Obamas that even held out somewhat. And by the end of the week, they had endorsed her as well. And this is a candidate that anyone in her position would have had a difficult time being an 11th hour replacement candidate running a replacement campaign. And, to her credit, in those big moments, her speech, the Trump debate, she did show up and she did have stage presence, and she was able to hold her own against a former president of the United States, which is not easy to do. But all those weaknesses in turn became liabilities for her. And that's partially because Joe Biden put her in that position. She really can't be blamed for only having 100 days to do it.
It does make you wonder how different this election would have been if Joe Biden had stayed in the race, because Biden had built-in strengths with the white working class due to his legacy ties to there, and maybe they would have still abandoned him in droves, but it doesn't it just because of one bad debate performance back in June. I do question if he was really out of it as much as
the issue would have been the money. Democrats need big money elections. Harris inherited the $250 million Biden war chest, and then on top of that raised another $1 billion. Yeah. The money was drying up for Biden, and if Dems can't run a candidate that can fundraise, that's a danger, whereas Republicans have proven they can. They don't need candidates with big coffers.
But it also goes to show how much of fundraising is all about vibes.
There you
and
go.
And the joy, yes. Well, there are going to be so many questions that people are going to be asking themselves about this election cycle and what could have been done differently, if the Democratic freak out about Biden was too soon, if it even was warranted at all. But yes, as you mentioned, lots of history in a very short amount of time, and I think we're all kind of tired and ready for a little bit of a break. But for more, be sure to check out washingtonexaminer.com for more exclusive interviews, conservative views, and breaking news.